today we are going to, at a baseline, acknowledge we have immigrants and refugees in Indianapolis. And those people are living in fear, and those people face different kind of challenges than many of us face. And that because of our Christian faith and our United Methodist practice, that we are called to engage and care for and love those people. I am really excited to introduce to you Becca Jocelyn. She is the manager of training and resources at the Immigrant Welcome Center. She's been there for almost 2 years, and I asked her, how did you come to be working for the Immigrant Welcome Center? She shared with me that her undergraduate college degree was in community development, and because of her father being in the Navy and stationed in Cuba, her internship that she did was with the United Nations, working in Cuba with migrants in Cuba. So she had some on-the-ground experience that led her one step to another to the Immigrant Welcome Center. And the Immigrant Welcome Center is really the probably the premier organization in Indianapolis who has been serving and welcoming the immigrants that are in the Indianapolis area for a long time. But as we are coming to some different kind of circumstances right now, it is a good time for us to hear from her. So Becca, come on up.
Well, hello everybody. Thank you, Shelley, for the warm introduction and for all of your warm introductions. Happy to be here. I'm going to go and share a little bit about some data talking about the immigrant communities that we are seeing in our community in Indianapolis, and then I'll also again share a little bit about our programs. When we talk about immigration and the refugee communities, at large we're talking about migration. And with that conversation, it's really important to think about what are the factors that are driving that migration? What's the root of why we are seeing people come into our communities? And those are what we like to call the push and pull factors, right? So what's pushing somebody out of their home country or their communities, and what's pulling them into Indianapolis, to Indiana, to the US, to their specific communities. So some common push factors that we do see with the immigrant communities that we are working with are armed conflict, disaster exposure, gender inequality, lack of job opportunities, political corruption, or even just a general lack of access to healthcare, education, some of the basic rights that we all have access to here. But if you flip that and you think about, okay, well, what's pulling people in? It's the opposite, right? So better work opportunities, greater access to healthcare, education, etc. So when we talk about migration on an international scale, international migration is anybody moving from one country to another. That is not including internal migration, which is a whole other pool of probably a couple 100 million people as well, where people are still within their home country, but maybe were displaced from their communities for one of these reasons. But looking at just international migration as a whole, in 2020, which was the most recent data provided by the IOM, the International Organization of Migration, they said there was about 281 million migrants worldwide, anybody moving from one country to another. That, in 2020, was about 3.6% of the world's population, and so even just if we're following the trends of the growth of population, we can estimate that there's about 290 million migrants today. So, a lot of people moving from one place to another for any of these reasons, coming or going for any of these reasons. So looking a little bit closer, regionally, we can see that Indiana as a state is made up by about 42.4% from Latin America, and this is the foreign-born population. So 42.4% from Latin America, 33.3% from Asia, 10.5% from Europe, and about 11.3% from Africa. In the state of Indiana, about 6.1% of all of Indiana is foreign-born, and specifically in Marion County, 12.1% of Marion County is foreign-born. And there are a lot of factors that play a role in this high percentage. One is just high population, right? We see that share of population. But also if we look at the economic opportunities, the employment opportunities, and the education opportunities, those are all those pull factors, right? So if we look across Indiana, we can see where Cummins is, the county where Cummins is, high immigrant population there. West of Indianapolis, where Purdue is, we see a little bit of a higher population there. Northern Indiana, huge RV industry, so Elkhart County has a pretty high percentage of foreign-born as well, and Marion County is kind of a mix of a lot of that, so that kind of explains why we see such a high share. And then talking about language, about 17.6% of Marion County speak another language at home other than English. So part of the work that we do when we're working with our community partners is really ensuring that the work that we're doing with immigrant and refugee communities, we want to make sure that we have resources and materials available in some of the top languages that we see in these communities, because there is such a high share of people that speak other languages at home. So I'll talk a little bit about what those languages are, but I just want to keep that in mind as we're talking about how to be a resource to the community. Language accessibility is one of those for sure. I want to share a little bit about who we are as an organization. Our mission at Immigrant Welcome Center is to be a trusted partner and an advocate for all immigrants. When we say all immigrants, we mean really anybody, regardless of what country you're from, what language you speak, how long you've been here. Regardless of your immigration status even, we are just here to be a partner for those that are in our communities that are needing resources in a variety of different areas. Our vision is that every immigrant in Indiana is thriving, and our values are equity, accountability, collaboration, and trust. A little bit also about our history of how we were founded. In 2005, there was a study done by the former First Lady of Indianapolis, Amy Minnick Peterson, along with the Greater Indianapolis Progress Committee. And they did a couple studies and some research, and they did some focus groups to see what's the best way to support the immigrant communities that we're seeing. They also looked at some other cities across the US, especially Chicago, as it's close, and seeing what's Chicago doing? What are some other cities doing to support the immigrant communities well? And out of all of that research and those focus groups and studies, by 2006, the Immigrant Welcome Center was established with the help of a couple volunteers known as Natural Helpers, which is a program we still have today, and I'll share about that in a little bit. So we were kind of formed out of that and have been going since 2006, and really just doing our mission to partner and advocate for the immigrants that are in our communities. So looking at Marion County, just in some communities, we can see some pockets of communities show up. And maybe you live in one of these areas or you work in one of these areas and you can kind of see, yeah, I can see that. Yeah, that makes sense. So looking at the west side of Indianapolis, 42% of the foreign-born population, and specifically 51% of the West African population, lives in just those three zip codes on the west side, 46224, 222, and 254. I live on the west side, my husband's a teacher on the west side, and we drive through those streets, through the communities, and he can see it in his schools. We're like, yeah, we can see that community here. There's restaurants, and there's markets, and there's churches that are, for the cultures and the communities that are there. And he can see it with his students and the families that go to the school. So we can kind of see the communities as we're just driving through, especially talking about the West African population. That's where we do see the Nigerian population primarily. On the northeast side, Lawrence area, there's also a pretty high foreign-born population. About 5.1% of all foreign-born lives in 46226. And we're also starting to see, just on the east side in general, a bit of a concentration and a higher share of foreign-born, but also the Haitian population we're starting to kind of see show up, and it's growing so much. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but we are kind of starting to see a little bit of a concentration there and communities forming, and it's really cool to see the ways that it's showing up with the restaurants that are coming up and the Haitian food, which if you have not tried, it's so delicious, and churches and markets, things like that. Similarly, on the south side of Indianapolis, if any of you are familiar, there's a very large Burmese population. Specifically, 87% of the Burmese population lives in just 46226 and 46217. And this is just in Marion County. If you go outside of Marion County and go a little farther south in like Greenwood area, there's a very large Burmese population there. The Burmese population specifically is made up of a lot of refugees, and that has been really in the last 20 or so years. We've seen a lot of the Burmese population come to Indianapolis as refugees, and That process looks very specific for that population, where they are resettled by a refugee agency. We have 3 here in Indianapolis: Exodus Refugee, Catholic Charities, and the Burmese American Community Institute, which is on the south side. So since then, there's been a lot of individuals coming from Burma who are coming in as refugees, and that in itself is a pull factor, right? We're talking about familiarity of culture and of food and just community. That is a huge pull factor in itself. So we start to kind of see that with other pockets of populations. When we're talking about those pull factors, yes, of course, access to healthcare and education, those are huge pull factors, but it's also a community that's familiar, where you feel like you belong. That's really a huge pull factor as well. I talked a little bit about how we see the impact in our communities just by driving around, but also we can see the impact of the immigrants in our communities in a couple other ways. The economic impact is, vast. There are lots of research, lots of articles that are done about looking at the economic impact of our immigrant communities. A couple myths that I want to bust is that it's easy to become a US citizen and anyone can do it. That is a myth, and the fact is that obtaining citizenship is costly, it's very complicated, and it's very lengthy with really limited options. The reality is that not everybody has a direct pathway to citizenship. It's very challenging to obtain citizenship in a lot of different ways. And part of the work that we do, which I'll share about, is really supporting those to get them on track for citizenship. But unfortunately, sometimes we come across individuals who are wanting to move from maybe a temporary status to a permanent status and move towards becoming a citizen, and unfortunately, there's no options. And so that's really a fact that we want to make sure people know, is that it's not possible for everybody. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but I just want to bust that myth. And the second myth that I want to bust is that immigrants negatively impact the US economy. And like I said, there's a lot of research done that really shows that immigrants contribute huge amounts in tax dollars and just in other ways to the economy. So I shared some of the top countries of origin that we see in central Indiana, and that's by census data and local data. But I also want to share a little bit of our client data. So this data up here is the top 5 countries of origin that we saw in the clients that we served in 2024. Number 1 was Haiti. Number 2 was Mexico. Number 3 was Venezuela. Number 4 was Afghanistan. And number 5 was Nicaragua. So a couple countries on here that are not necessarily top 5, or maybe aren't reflected in the census, but are top 5, especially the Haitian population. I mentioned a growth in the Haitian population, and there's a couple reasons why we aren't necessarily seeing that in the top 5 census data that I shared earlier. One is that it's just grown so much recently. Data is always a couple years behind. I kind of expect in a year or two it will show up, at least in top 10. And second is that sometimes the census data doesn't accurately capture those populations, where either there's not a clear understanding of how to fill it out, or it's not reaching those communities, or there's not an option for them to select that they're Haitian, and that goes for a couple other populations as well. So a couple reasons why we aren't seeing that in the census data, but it is for sure our data. It was about 30 to 40% of the clients we served in 2024. So huge Haitian population in the work that we are doing. Also with the Venezuelan population, not necessarily top 5, but there are a lot of unique needs that the Venezuelan communities here in Indianapolis have, of what they are coming from, what they are looking for as far as resources, so that's why we see them in our data. And also with the Afghan population, not necessarily top 5, but we saw them primarily in our English classes. They came in maybe with a work permit ready to go. They weren't necessarily looking for employment, not everybody, but they were looking for English classes. And so we see them kind of in different programs that we offer. And along with the top 5 countries, the top languages that we saw that reflect that were Spanish, Haitian Creole, and then a mix of Dari, Farsi, Persian for the Afghan community, and then Arabic for the Middle Eastern populations that we saw pretty spread out, and French. and that's other than English. So a lot of our staff, thankfully, speaks a lot of these languages. We also have a fully functioning interpretation line so that we really do emphasize the language accessibility component and ensuring materials are available in those languages, and if possible, we have people there to speak those languages so that we can connect with those communities. We have a database that I will share in a little bit as a resource for you all. This database is something that's accessible from our website. It's a national database. It's powered by Find Help. If you're familiar with 211, 211 is also powered by Find Help. So we have a domain through Find Help called IWC Connect. Essentially, it's a robust list of free or low-cost resources in your area. So again, it's national, and it will have you put in your zip code, and when you put in your zip code, it will filter it kind of by your area. Again, we use this as staff when we are working with our clients, but we also want to ensure that it's in the hands of our community partners as they're working maybe with the immigrant refugee communities one way or another. But the great thing, from my perspective, about this database is that on the back end, we can see what are people looking for. What are, maybe the top needs that we're seeing in certain communities, and we can filter it by zip codes, and we can get really specific with the data, which is really informative to the work that we are doing. So in 2024, the top services that were searched through this database, through our domain, were English classes, housing, legal, food and clothing, employment, and health. And that's maybe finding healthcare or paying for healthcare, all of the above. And these are generally always the top 6 needs year to year. They shift quite a bit, and they shift throughout the year. So in the warmer months, housing drops down. In the colder months, housing comes up to about number 1 or number 2. Right now, I looked, and in January and February, legal, number 1, by far. So we can kind of see some of that, some of the needs of our communities reflected through this database, which is really great. This database has been really informative for the work that we do to see from a different perspective what are the needs of the communities. So I'm going to go through the programs that we offer. We have 4 direct services, and outside of this, I'll probably emphasize this a couple more times. Outside of the direct services that we offer, we also do a lot of referrals. So we are really heavily connected with partners in the community that provide some specific services that maybe we don't. So people come into our office looking for a variety of different needs, and maybe it's something we can plug them into our direct programs, and if not, we'll refer them out. So you'll see some of those needs in our direct services, and outside of that, we refer to a lot of programs that do those things. So the first direct service that we offer is just generally immigrant and refugee support. We have the database that I mentioned. Again, I'll give it to you as a resource in a second. We also have a helpline, which is available during working hours, and all of our staff kind of mans this. And this is usually a place where people can come and just, call and ask questions or figure out, what do you guys offer? What's available to me? And we can kind of go, figure out the next steps from there. We also have our Natural Helpers program, which has been with us since the very beginning. We started with 12 natural helpers, and now we have, I think we just hit like 100, which is huge. And our natural helpers, many of them are immigrants themselves. So they represent a lot of the same countries of origin and the languages and the experiences that our clients do. And they are available for a variety of different things, but they're really available to just walk alongside our clients and help them navigate unfamiliar systems, help navigate, maybe enrolling their kids in schools and working with school counselors, or finding healthcare, or enrolling in Medicaid, or whatever need it is that might be a new and unfamiliar thing. They are there to just walk alongside them, help them get plugged into those resources, and navigate some of those systems. We also have our community navigators. Nilofer is one of our community navigators. She works closely with women that we see come through, especially those that have experienced domestic violence. But she also helps our communities get connected to resources, so she does a lot of our referrals. The second direct service that we offer is our citizenship and legal support. So I mentioned, we talked a little bit about legal as a need and citizenship, and we do focus primarily on citizenship. So getting people on track for citizenship through a couple different ways. The first is our citizenship classes. So for anybody who's getting ready to take the civics exam, They can go through a 6-week course to help them prepare, and it's kind of like history lessons, going through a lot of the questions that could be asked. If you're not familiar with the civics exam, there's 100 questions that could be asked by an immigration officer. A lot of them is about history, or maybe people in office, some things regarding like the Declaration of Independence and things like that. So there's 100 questions that could be asked, and the immigration officer will ask you 10 of them, and you have to get 6 right to pass. So a lot to study for, very little that could be asked, but good to be prepared for any of those questions. We also do offer citizenship support in the form of workshops. So for anybody who's wanting to apply for citizenship, we bring in immigration lawyers and attorneys from the community to help them fill out these applications and get them submitted like right then and there. And both of these services are free for the community. So we really want to support those who, maybe if finances are a struggle for applying for citizenship, we want to support them in that ways and also just set them up for success for the exam. Outside of that, obviously legal needs are vast, and there's so many of them, and it's very, very case by case. So we do a lot of referrals to immigration lawyers and attorneys in the community who can help connect our clients to resources or give them legal advice depending on their needs. The third direct program that we offer is our English language literacy program. Within this program, we offer English classes. And the English classes that we offer are specific to anybody who's had less than 6 years of formal education. Whether in their home country or here in the US, if they have had limited or interrupted education, then they could qualify for our English classes. Because what we've seen, there are so many wonderful English classes in the communities, all spread out throughout Indianapolis, but some of them start at a little bit more advanced level, assuming people know how to read and write in English, which isn't always the case. So our English classes start at a very beginner's level, where they can learn how to read and write in English. And it's a pathway program, so they work their way through it, graduate out of it, and then we refer them to English classes depending on kind of what level they're at, where they want to start, and their availability and all of that. So those are the classes that we specifically offer. However, within this program, we do a lot of referrals to other English classes if maybe somebody's had more than 6 years or wants to start at a little bit more advanced level. So kind of either track they can go if they're looking for English classes, either ours or one in the community that's at the level that they're ready to start. We also have a wonderful program that has recently started and has really taken off, and this is our English in the Workplace, or English at Work. And in this program, we partner with employers in the community to provide English classes at their workplace for their employees whose first language might not be English. So this is a really cool program where we are working with employers. Obviously, we saw employment is a need, and so we're partnering with employers, which is really valuable, but also ensuring that their employees, who might be immigrants and might not speak English, have the tools to succeed in the work that they're doing. So really cool program where employers are able to provide that right at the workplace for their employees, and we work with them to kind of get that all set up. So that's all kind of part of this program, which is really cool. The last program that we offer is our community partner support. This is my program, and I'll share a little bit more about kind of the work that I get to do. But within this program, we really, really value our work with our partners, with those that are in their communities. Obviously, I've mentioned quite a few times that we do a lot of referrals, and so we want to ensure that the relationships that we have with our community partners are valuable and that they have the tools to succeed. So we offer a couple different forms of partnership. The first are trainings and presentations similar to this, to just share about who we are, what we do, resources for you all. And we also offer trainings. And so some of the trainings that we offer are around just cultural trainings, learning how to effectively engage with diverse cultures, depending on kind of the work that you're doing. We also offer specific cultural trainings on specific cultures. So maybe you're seeing a lot of the Haitian population or the Burmese population, and you're like, I just want to learn more about that community and learn, maybe some of the ways that they celebrate traditions and holidays, or more about the food that they eat, and that's part of their culture. We, with our cultural lunch and learns, we really dig into those aspects of the culture. We bring in our natural helpers who represent that culture to kind of share about their experiences and their perspectives and answer any questions. And those are always really wonderful trainings that we get to do. So if you're at all interested in that for maybe the work that you're in, please connect with me. I'm happy to get more information to you or answer any questions and kind of figure out something that might be good for you all. All right, going on to resources. I want to share a couple. The first, I've mentioned this a couple times, I'll finally give it to you. This is our IWC Connect. This is the database that we use. Again, we use it as staff when we're working with clients, but we also want to get it out to the community as much as possible. This is accessible from our website, or you can scan this QR code. If you go to our website, which is just immigrantwelcomecenter.org, the first thing that you'll see is like an orange box that says Find Resources. If you click that, it'll take you to this page. And it'll ask you to put in your zip code. So it filters it by your area. And you can start searching for programs that are around you, depending on kind of what topic you're interested in. And maybe you're working with a family or you're working with somebody that's looking for something specific and you're like, gee, I don't even know where to start looking for that resource. This is a great place to go to just see what's out there, what's available. So I really encourage you to spend some time going through this database and learn how it can be a tool for you and the work that you're doing. If anything, just to see what's available, what's out there. All of the programs on there have pretty clear outlines as far as who's eligible for them, what their availability is, a little bit more of what they do, and how to get in contact with them. So it's a great action-oriented, you can refer people on there or just go to their website from there and get connected. We've also developed quite a few resources just in the past few months around supporting immigrants and refugees in our communities who might be facing fears or unsure of what their rights are right now, or how to plan as a family so that if something did happen, they have kind of a plan in place. We have quite a few resources on our website. If you go to our website and to I think it will say Explore More. One of the tabs is Resources, and this will pop up. So all of these are hyperlinks, and they take you to PDFs or other websites where you can kind of download all these resources or print them. And it's just a really, really great tool right now. We are getting them out as much as possible. There's Know Your Rights cards, the red cards that you can have just to know what your constitutional rights are, whether you are a citizen of the US or not, and also some family preparedness plans. There's some tools for schools, for undocumented families, a lot of wonderful tools on there that you can pass out as much as you need to your communities. The Faith and Facts I pulled from your website. It's a great, great resource just to see what the United Methodist Church says about immigration. I know Shelley covered a little bit, but that's a great tool. The More Resources tab is also from your website that just has a couple other great tools on there. Some ways that you can partner with us, support us. One is to volunteer with us. Within 3 of the programs that I mentioned, we have volunteer opportunities. So whether in our English classes, in the citizenship workshops that we do, or with our Natural Helpers program, we are always looking for more volunteers to support in any of these ways. You can read a little bit more about kind of what those volunteer opportunities look like, and then the link on the bottom, which again, we'll get these out to you, or you can just ask me. I'll connect you with Sergio. He's our Natural Helpers and volunteer coordinator, so he can connect you, can talk with you, figure out what's best for you, and get you plugged into those programs to volunteer. The next way that you can support our work is to donate. If you are able to financially support, we are grateful for any ways that you can. And you will actually probably be hearing a little bit more about this from Shelley in the coming weeks and months. We, as Immigrant Welcome Center, will be partnering with St. Luke's to financially support our clients in a couple specific ways. So Shelley will have more information on that. For now, if you'd like to volunteer or donate directly to us, you're welcome to. But also, we will continue to be partnering with you so that if you are able to financially support us and support our clients in a few different ways, you'll have that way to do that. I know that was a lot of information. With the time that we have left, I'd love to take a couple questions. So Shelley asked, can you share a little bit about some of the visas or statuses that you see and what is kind of part of that? So I'll share probably the top 4 that we see with the clients that we're working with and explain a little bit about what they are. The first is asylum status, which you've probably heard and might be familiar with. Asylum status is given to those that come from another country and have faced some sort of fear of persecution or persecution based on a couple different factors, and it's all outlined by USCIS of what might qualify someone as an asylee or as seeking asylum. It can be based on religious persecution, social persecution, gender persecution, or their affiliation with any sort of like social group. All kind of is outlined within that. And so if they qualify for that, and they're seeking asylum, the process for that is that asylum is applied for either at a U.S. port of entry or within the U.S. So what we see a lot, maybe we've seen at the U.S.-Mexico border, large groups of people there at the border. They are usually all seeking asylum. And the process before Trump administration in January was that there was an application on your phone called a CBP1 application. And it's something you had to apply for through the app, and basically you had to stay within a certain distance of where your appointment would be held, which was why so many people were there waiting. And all of a sudden it pops up and says, boom, your appointment's tomorrow, show up. And so people have to kind of get ready for their appointment. And then they can testify of their experiences, and the immigration officers would deem if they qualify to be an asylum. Unfortunately, all of that process has completely stopped. So a lot of people there at the border don't really have any clear next steps, or maybe have to go back to where they came from. But that's one, and it's also applied for within the U.S. So maybe somebody was here on a temporary status, maybe an employment visa or student visa, and something happened in their home country that made it unsafe for them to return, then they might qualify for asylum status. So that's one of the most common that we see. It's a permanent status, so it's, either you can apply for it from a temporary status, and you have to have it for a set number of years before you can become a lawful permanent, or before you can apply for citizenship. So I think the asylum status will get you on track for a green card to become a lawful permanent resident, and then you can apply for citizenship. So that's usually a common track towards citizenship, is from the asylum status. Another status that's common and is often confused with asylum status is refugee status. And so refugees have to have experienced or faced the same fear of persecution or persecution for the same amount of reasons as an asylum, same qualifications. However, refugee status is applied for outside of the U.S. It's also applied for outside of their home country, so there's some middle country that people usually will stay in at a refugee camp and go through that process of applying for refugee status and waiting to be placed somewhere. The internship that I did was with refugees waiting to be resettled from Cuba, Haiti, the Dominican Republic, any of those places, so we kind of worked with getting them resettled. What we see with the Burmese population, as I mentioned, is a lot of the Burmese communities that are here had been resettled as refugees. So again, it's all connected. It's a federal program all connected to the refugee agencies that are based locally that will kind of support them for a set amount of time. They'll find them housing, they'll usually find them work, and then financially support them until they can kind of get on their feet and be able to kind of independently thrive. Also, unfortunately, the refugee program has been completely shut down, and we're just not sure what it's going to look like, if it's going to pick back up, but for now, anybody that was planning to come to the U.S. as a refugee, that's all been kind of halted, so we're not sure what the next steps are with that. Another common status that we see is temporary protected status. This is, as it says in its name, a temporary status, so usually if people come in on a travel visa or student visa or employment visa, that's kind of for a set amount of time, and similarly, like maybe something happens in their home country that makes it unsafe for them to return, or unsafe, or the country itself is unable to handle the returns of its nationals, then they might qualify for TPS. Currently, there are 17 countries that have TPS set aside for them, and they all have kind of set expiration dates. Usually they renew. We see that quite often, though we're starting to see some of them not renew, which puts people that have TPS at kind of a, well, what do I do when it expires? You know, maybe I can't return to my home country, so we're looking for other options for them. And then another status that I do want to mention is DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. This is a status that's set aside for anyone under 18 who's come to the U.S. With their parents or with guardians in an unlawful way. And so if they've come in under 18 and maybe are here in the U.S., they might qualify for DACA, which allows them to have a work permit so that they can work. But it's also a temporary status. There's no direct pathway to citizenship from that. So sometimes we'll see people with DACA move to maybe asylum status or another permanent status to kind of get on track for citizenship. So those are the 4 most common that we see, and all of them are kind of up in the air right now, unfortunately. Any other questions? Yeah. Yes, great question. She asked, if somebody gets asylum status, is there usually an average amount of time it takes for them to get citizenship? And I will have to check myself on this, because it is either that they have asylum status for 5 years and then they get a green card, which you have to have a green card for about 5 years before you can apply for citizenship, or they have asylum status and they're a lawful permanent resident, and then in 5 years they can apply for citizenship. So it's either 5 or 10 or somewhere in between. I'm not 100% sure. I'll have to double check that. But it is also very case by case. Sometimes there are specific circumstances that might take longer or shorter, depending on the situation. But generally, about 5 to 10 years, people will have to have that asylum status before they can become a U.S. citizen. Great question. Yes, that's a great question. She asked if somebody's maybe interested in supporting one-on-one, maybe providing transportation or something like that. Would that be through the volunteer page that I mentioned, or maybe would that come with the collaboration that we're doing? And that's a great question. I would say probably through our volunteer program, if there's any unique needs, to have somebody available for that would be something that we would definitely have. So whether maybe that would make you a natural helper where you can kind of be available to support, and Sergio's the one that manages all our natural helpers, and he can kind of know, what people want to do or ways that they can help, and so when that need comes up, then he'll connect you with them and you can provide that service. So I would say through our natural helper or volunteer program, you can definitely connect with Sergio that way. But also, that's a great comment. Like I said, Shelly and I, we are, starting this collaboration, and so taking things like that into consideration and seeing maybe that's a good way to support. Maybe it's the financial support, but maybe it's offering things like that. We'll definitely consider that and have talks about that and see if that's something we can put together. So, great question. I would say for now, if you would like to connect with Sergio or go through our website, and just he can kind of give you more information, but we'll also continue talking about that, and that might be an option. Great question. Did you have another question? Great question. So he asked, what federal funding do we have, if any, whether indirect or direct, and how might we be affected by that? That is a great question. We, thankfully, are not federally funded at all. We are 100% grant funded and privately funded. So we have some amazing partners, Eli Lilly, Cummins, organizations in our communities that do support us directly. A lot of our positions and a lot of the work we do is grant funded. And so we're doing a lot of our work that way. Indirectly, I'm not sure if that might be an effect, but thankfully we don't have any direct federal funds, and so we are we're financially okay, which is good. However, it is hard to see so many of our partners that we work with be affected. For example, the refugee resettlement agencies that we do work so closely with, like Exodus Refugee, Catholic Charities, BACI, they are 100% federally funded because the refugee program is a federal program. So unfortunately, they are the ones that are really directly affected. And so we are continuing to find ways we can support them with the resources that thankfully we do still have. But that's a great question. Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, so she had said, can you talk about housing and who finds that? What are the challenges? Housing is a big challenge. We, thankfully, with our Community Navigator program, that is certainly a need that we see. And again, with fluctuations, variety of different reasons, but weather being one, we see those needs shift and rise. There's not a lot of resources around housing. We are partnered with a couple great organizations that do a lot of work around housing, especially kind of in an advocacy realm. GMA, they are a wonderful partner to us. Aaron Spiegel, Rabbi Aaron Spiegel, who is the executive director, he's on our board, and so we are able to partner with them in a lot of ways. They're doing a lot of advocacy around housing right now because there is just not a lot of resources around it. We do have a couple shelters and temporary housing programs that we are connected with, and usually when that need comes up, we'll just make the calls and see if there's anything available. As far as financially, we don't directly financially support paying for rent, covering for rent, but that's where we do partner with a lot of our community partners. So if there's churches or other nonprofits that maybe provide that direct support for housing and can provide like rent assistance or utilities assistance, then we usually will connect with those. So there's not a lot of resources, and it's certainly a need that we see. And so as far as advocacy and advocating for tenant rights and things like that, that's something that we are kind of involved in a couple different ways, but we do really rely on our communities for those resources. So yeah, great question. Yes. You had asked, surprised childcare wasn't on that need, but what are the options if people are kind of looking for childcare? It's certainly probably top 10, I would say, and it's very case by case. I have not come across too many connecting clients, needing to connect clients with childcare resources, but if anything, the database that I shared does have that as a category, I believe, and so there are some programs on there that you can find. Again, it's all filtered by area, so you can kind of find something that's maybe close to you, or maybe they have more connections, and it's just a good starting spot to see what's available. So my recommendation, because that's probably what I would do, is go to the database and see what's out there. So great question. Food and clothing, great question. Yeah, great question. So this is a pretty high need. We saw it in our top 6. It's a high need that's usually goes along with a couple other needs. Usually a client comes in, maybe they're looking for employment or they're looking for housing, and consequently food and clothing's on that list as well. So we have a couple great partners that we do partner with. Grassroots Project. They are a great partner for the work that we do. They work a lot with connecting kids to like diapers and kids' clothings, but they also provide a lot of different foods, a lot of different like goods and clothings. And then as far as food, Gleaners is a wonderful partner for us. They do a lot of really great work in the community, and there's also a couple local food pantries that we can refer people to, again, depending on where they're at. The database, not to tie everything back to the database, but it is a great tool. There's a lot of cool food banks on there. Again, it's all kind of by your area, so you can find food banks that maybe are near you, but grassroots projects, Welcome Baskets is another great partner for us that provides some food and clothing directly. We do a lot of referrals there.
Thank you, Becca. Lots of information shared, lots. I want to follow up with some specifics, and I think Nikki is going to put up our, we just have newly gone live with a page on our website, on our church website. It is, if you want to even write this down, it's stlukesumc.com/neighbor. And on this website are all kinds of links, many of the resources that Becca mentioned. Here are some very specific ways that you can volunteer and or donate. It's really important for you to know our diaper pantry. Last year we served close to 300 unique families that I've got some of our diaper pantry experts here. I think it's pretty safe to say that 100% of our families that come through the diaper pantry are immigrants of some kind of status. So continuing to support our diaper pantry and volunteer, and it's very similar at the Crooked Creek Food Pantry. Huge percentage of families coming through Crooked Creek Food Pantry. So we can be pretty proud of the fact that we've already been supporting this way, and it's important to continue. She named a few specific things I want to make sure you heard. People who are taking citizenship classes need help studying. So working with people who are studying for their citizenship class, practicing those questions, tutoring and mentoring them in one-on-one or small group settings is a way that you can get involved. Also, the English classes, they've got teachers, but they also need tutors and people just to work on English skills with them. So those are really specific ways that we know you can get involved right now. She mentioned the natural helpers, and I think there's a little bit more to being involved that way, but if you're somebody who's like, I'm ready to go all in here, there's a potential through that avenue. And then down below, we do have a lot of the resources for immigrant families. So if somebody you know, if a neighbor, one of your kids' friends at school, if you are in conversation and you're like, I know there's a bunch of resources, but I can't remember where to go, you can at least start here. And we link to some of the trusted resources that we've been given over the last couple of weeks. And then finally, the donating option, like Becca said, we are working on this, but they do not have the funds to support people who are applying for citizenship, who need employment cards, who are trying to get their U.S. passport to prove their citizenship. The actual fees to do that can add up really quickly for families who are struggling. And so our hope and goal is, as we're working with them, that we can create a fund that they can access to help people with those specific kind of costs that can make their situation more stable. Well, thank you so much for your time and your interest. There is a quote by Andy Stanley who says, "Do for one what you wish you could do for everyone." There's a lot happening, there's a lot of information. Don't let that overwhelm you and shut down. Do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. Thank you.